The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, now in its 17th year, one of the city's longest running TV talk shows. We're on live tonight, so our phones are open, so please don't hesitate to call in with questions or comments. As always, you can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, tonight's guests have released a study about Bronx public housing, showing dissatisfaction with the city's housing authority, no surprise there, but offering a recommendation of the creation of a South Bronx Green Jobs Institute to spur the local economy and also clean up some environmental problems. No surprise there either. Nice ideas for sure, but there are a number of other questions like who should do it, how should it be done, who should pay for it, etc. We'll ask those questions and others tonight. Please join me in welcoming from Mothers on the Move, Nova Strachan. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And also from the Urban Justice Center, Lindsay Cattell. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Nova, let's start with you. Bronx public housing. Tell me what's going on there that kind of inspired the idea. And here's the study that they did. It's right here. What's going on in public housing that made you and the Urban Justice Center say we've got to do a study and come up with something?
Well, it starts with, when we door knock, when we speak to residents, it's what is the basic need in our developments besides, the repair needs, which is very obvious, the garbage removal, the unattended hallways. There's a lot of things going on in public housing, but, with this whole economic crisis that happened, we've been always in a recession, but it really hit hardest everyone. It wasn't just us being impacted. And we really felt that with the lack of jobs, the lack of employment. Unemployment rose. We have a very high number of unemployment in our community in the South Bronx. And New York City public housing residents is highly impacted by unemployment. So we figured that we want to address two things. We want to address that issue, and then we also want to address the repair needs that is outstanding. Some folks wait for repairs to be tended to for couple years, if not a couple of months. So with this study, we did a survey, and then we also have focus groups. And we found out from the residents and from community members what it is that when they are out here looking for work, when they are out here dealing on a daily struggle, what is it that you need in this community? Do you even know what green jobs mean or what greening our community means, and how it would benefit us? They talk about...
Did you introduce the notion of green jobs, or did that come back to you that people said, oh, I would like to be involved in green jobs?
We spoke about it because of the high public health issues. We have obesity in our community. We have a lot of asthma, highest rate of asthma, and that's due to the pollution through companies like Niafco, which is a fertilizer company that takes human waste and turn them into fertilizer pellets. Burning human waste is, obviously a very noxious odor, but it's also very unhealthy. And when we spoke to a lot of residents, we asked, the first question that we would ask is, how many people in your household is affected by asthma? What are some of the things that you feel in your community is causing this? Why is it that there's such a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables when we have the largest fruit and vegetable distribution in our community? So that came up. Let
me bring Lindsay into the conversation. Lindsay, if you were to go and knock on doors anywhere in the city, you'd get people, certainly in urban areas, and in congested areas, you'd get people talking about many of the same things: unemployment, healthcare issues. The fact that even if not only in public housing, that in privately owned housing, places are in a state of disrepair. Is there anything that makes this particular study distinctive that you wouldn't get maybe somewhere else? Because many of the things that Nova's talking about, frankly, I hear on this show, and you live in the Bronx, you hear about it all the time. So tell me what makes this distinctive, if anything.
Yeah, I think what's really distinctive about this is it's focused on public housing. Now, certainly the South Bronx and all of the Bronx are affected by these issues, but I think public housing in the South Bronx is disproportionately affected by it, first of all. And second of all, this is a really community-based survey. Nova they talked to members, and out of that process is how they decided to do the surveys. And so really I think the difference between maybe, just a general researcher knocking on someone's door, in this case, Mothers on the Move members got training to do it, and they went to their own neighbors and asked, what's going on. And I think because of that personal level of interaction, we really got some deeper results than you can otherwise.
What was did you folks work together in the preparation for it? I'm just laying it out for our viewers, and then we're going to get into some of the specifics about, especially what I think is interesting is the interrelationship, a lot of these issues. But I just want to lay this out there. So did they come up with a survey and you said, we'll help, or did you work together to create the thing from the beginning?
Yeah, well, so I work at the Community Development Project of the Urban Justice Center, and our role is to a community organization like Mothers on the Move will come to us and ask us to provide the technical assistance in a lot of ways to do the surveys. Now, we do participatory action research, so our whole model is lifting up the residents and the community members. It's not, and kind of debunking research stereotypes, so it's not some sterile academic with research and that just sits on a shelf. It's connected to the community, it's community-led, community-initiated. So I think that's
it
what
really
sets
was
our
as
work apart.
grassroots
Yes.
as knocking on somebody's door, opening the door, and having a number of people just tell you what they think.
Yes.
Frankly, we like to think sometimes that's what BronxTalk is. You can
Right.
people in the Bronx will pick up the phone and
Right.
call, and if you do want to call, don't hesitate. This to me is a fascinating thing, and I really want to get into it. Is this interrelationship between unemployment, public health, and housing conditions? I mean, this really, I think, is the center of it, and what you tried to do was put everything together. So Nova, why don't you start and explain it, because I think it's not only a center of focus of this study, which is very interesting, but it's also, I think, a center of focus if we want to improve life in the Bronx, how we're going to go about
right.
it. So talk about what you discovered between unemployment, public health, and housing.
Well, it's all the obvious. I mean, when you have to deal with mold and different conditions in your apartment, that's definitely going to affect your health, whether it be mentally or physically. I mean, you have to breathe in. We have rodents. We have different things in our apartments, but that's due to like the garbage that's accumulating in our developments at times. If we had if we had more of a recycling aspect. When we think of that, it's like the awareness of how these things are affecting us.
See, now that's very obvious. Now let's bring in the idea of unemployment. If you told me that education was related, or lack of education was related to unemployment, even poverty, I would say, okay, but then how is public health and these housing conditions related to unemployment?
Well, one, there's such a lack of opportunities, and the main thing that we are looking at is that ownership. If a resident is trained properly to do this job, to take care of to be the caregiver of their grounds, it's more of a self-respect, and it's more of a ownership of that property, and it would make folks be more invested in the property itself. When you know that they are the caretakers of the building, they are doing the fixing and the plastering, or the painting, or also the upkeep of these elevators, and even security.
Again, I'm going to re-ask the question that I asked earlier. Did people suggest this idea that, hey, we want to, have an input into, our community, or is it something that you said, hey, you know what, would this work for you? And they said, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
No, this is what residents
What they told you.
and people. Yes, this is what they need and what they want, and they feel that this will address, like I said, the repairs, but then also address our basic needs, which is to sustain ourselves as residents.
Lindsay, I want to give you a shot at this interrelationship idea between these items, and then we're going to get into what the proposal is as a solution.
Right.
So did you want to respond to that about the idea of interrelationship between these issues?
Yeah, I think they're very connected, right? So going along with what Nova was saying, that when you work in your community and you are working on your own building, there's a certain investment in that. And so you're more likely to keep up your own maintenance and more likely to invest and do the work better. But as you were asking about connecting public health and unemployment, I mean, really, if you're sick, if you're dealing with things like asthma, if your housing conditions are to the extent where there's, rodents, mold happening in your house, that's going to affect your health, and that's going to affect how you can go to work, if you're able to go to work on time, how often you're able to work. So really, I see public health and work as very interconnected, and again, coming very closely with the housing conditions that really impacts the health.
And also, if I can just interject, that if you are interviewed for a job and you will not come across as well as somebody who comes from a place that might be a little more comfortable and is not dealing with some of those issues, or the one thing that will happen if you call and say, gee, I can't come in today because I have to go to the doctor, you're not getting that job even if it's not your fault. So let's talk about this solution, this proposal of a Green Jobs Institute. What is it? And Lindsay, we'll let you have a whack at it. What is it? How does it work? And how do you and Mothers on the Move see this operating in the Bronx?
Well, we're proposing a green jobs program specifically for NYCHA residents. Now that would connect NYCHA residents to training services, to green training services, and then provide employment afterwards. And the employment would primarily be doing retrofits in their own buildings, in NYCHA buildings. So
creating this sense of ownership that Nova was talking about.
Exactly. So what we're suggesting is a partnership between NYCHA and then a number of different trade unions that have their own apprenticeship programs and can connect residents to green trainings. And then also with a community organization like Mothers on the Move, who can provide ongoing services and connect residents to the training.
Your proposal, it sounds logical. It sounded logical to me when I read about it, and then I went back and read the study. So just to review, we want to have people have ownership in their own buildings. We want to, rather than use the same old tactics for improving the buildings, have a green initiative and then employ people. And one thing will lead to the other, make the buildings better, make people healthier, and of course give them jobs. Sounds very logical.
I mean, they will hire contractors.
We're about to come up with a devil's advocate question, but go ahead, you can interject.
I mean, NYCHA, they will spend money on contractors, outside contractors, and a lot of times when you speak to the resident, for example, the intercoms, they will hire one contractor to come and fix the intercoms, then it breaks down, then they're hiring another one, and then it's almost like if this one team did something that's messed up, now they have to call another team so it's like you can call outside folks. We want it to be within our community.
As I understand, there's a $5 million price tag on setting this up. Is that, I got that right? In the Daily News, NYCHA responded saying, we already have green programs. We've purchased tens of thousands of new appliances, trained residents to plant trees, and begun a $371 million push to retrofit buildings, even hiring residents to green the Castle Hill houses. Your response? I thought it sounds like they're like, hey, we're already on our way.
Right. I think NYCHA they have some initiatives, and we want to commend them for that. But I think it's too little, and it's not community-led, and there's no community oversight. So, for example, in Castle Hills, they did a pilot program. Now, that was a great program, and they did a lot of the retrofits, the same retrofits we're suggesting. But where's the community involvement? Where's the community oversight of that project? And I think NYCHA also has a number of other initiatives, employment initiatives, but they're just insufficient to meet the needs. They're not green jobs focused.
They say they are millions and millions, many millions of dollars in the red. How can you possibly ask us for $5 million to start a program like this?
I mean, NYCHA has a $1.6 billion budget. $5 million is pennies to them, but they do have a deficit, and that is a real challenge. We've identified a number of funding sources through NYCHA is participating in the Energy Performance Contracting Program, which is the $371 million figure that you just quoted. Now that is, they should be hiring residents to do that. At this point, they're not planning. The majority of the jobs that will come out of that will not go to NYCHA residents. They will go to an outside contractor, as Nova was mentioning, which is really a misuse of NYCHA funds. If they employ their own residents, they will see an increased rent revenue from that. So it's really in the self-interest of NYCHA to employ their own residents, and in the long term, it could save NYCHA money.
Has there been any interaction after this study? Then you call the housing authority and say, hey, we want to really, because what this sounds like is you want to do is establish a partnership. Mm-hmm. Is there any sense that they're receptive to that?
Well, we've gotten some calls that they want to meet. We had a meeting with Margarita Lopez, which is the environmental commissioner, on October 14th. Since then, we had wanted to have a working meeting with her, a follow-up meeting, and it's been like pulling teeth. But since
why?
Because
in other words, you're ready to do it.
We're ready. We've been ready.
Okay, I just wanted to establish that. Go ahead.
Yes. So I mean, we've read like in the Daily News and different articles that we work with Mothers on the Move, or we are already doing this, as you mentioned before. But the difference is, okay, Castle Hill is the North Bronx. What's going on in the South Bronx? What pilot programs is going on in our community? Which is great in Castle Hill. I mean, and Tech 21 was a great opportunity, which was the company that was responsible with putting in those sensors that censors the energy consumption of apartments. And like one of the
it makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And what some of the representatives of that agency said, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put a box on the wall, unscrew it, put a chip and screw it back. It's very, very logical jobs, and is not outrageous. But one thing that Margarita Lopez mentioned is like 70%. I don't want to quote the numbers, but she said a percentage of residents don't have a college degree. We don't have a GED. We don't have a high school diploma, which we understand that is a serious issue.
So then if you're, just to clarify for our viewers, so then if you're saying, hey, let's create a jobs program, well, you do need trained people.
That's right. So that's what our job is, to make sure that we get the residents halfway there and don't set them up for failure. We establish partnerships with organizations like Sobro, with organizations like the Osborne, which also works with formerly incarcerated people, because we want everyone to be included in this green economy. We also have the CWE, which is Consortium for Workers' Education, and these are the folks that place our residents and members and community members in the trainings that they need to do this job adequately. So we definitely, we would never want to set up our people or our community members for failure. We want to make sure that they are on that road to be able to not have 3 to 6 month jobs, but to have careers and be able to sustain their family.
One of the things I can just add to the dialogue from my familiarity with the Department of Environmental Protection, when there was a lot of talk about jobs working on the filtration plant here, they set apprenticeship programs up, I believe, down at New York City Tech, and also at Bronx Community College. This is the kind of thing you're suggesting, is that if you're going to do it, let's do it right and do it from the ground up. Exactly. Now, I want to ask, maybe Lindsay, you can talk a little bit about this. Pulled this out of the study, this REP, the Resident Employment Program, which requires businesses with more than $500,000 in contracts from NYCHA to allocate 15% of their labor costs to NYCHA residents. This would sound to me like this is really what you're saying, and that the rule and the program is already in place. Why do you need something other than this, or in addition to this? Right. Because this rule sounds like exactly what Nova's talking about.
Right. Well, let me first say that 15%, that's what they're supposed to have. A few years ago, the comptroller did an audit and found that number was closer, I think, to 8%. So really, even the 15%, they're not meeting the minimum requirements.
So you're saying that even though it requires businesses to do that, there's not enough oversight to go from the 8% to get to 15%.
Right. So that's the first challenge right there. They're not even following their own regulations, their own program. But the main problem disconnects to what Nova was saying. The resident employment program, you have to have a GED or a high school diploma to participate. It's an unpaid program, so it's 10 weeks where you're not getting paid. So there are some significant barriers to participating in that program, and it's really not comparable. You mentioned apprenticeship programs. Most apprenticeship programs are paid. So NYCHA has this program, but it's unpaid, and And really, you have to be at a certain economic standard to be able to even participate in the program.
Well, that sounds like it would not be appropriate for NYCHA residents if that's the case.
Exactly, and it doesn't make sense. NYCHA should be focusing on the people who need the training the most. You know, people who lack a formal education. Those are the ones that need the training the most. So there needs to be pre-programs. As a key component of ours that we've suggested is opening up to people of all education levels, and that there can be programs to bring them up to speed in order to participate in the, the full apprenticeship programs. And I think that's really key.
Do you have a sense, I don't know which of the two of you want to answer this, that if I was let's say I was managing NYCHA, and I know there are numerous physical plant problems with all of the projects all over the city, if they get into this dialogue and say, okay, now we're going to work with you, and each resident wants to have ownership, that it will open up an immense can of worms to, overhauling electrical systems and plumbing, that is going to open up a can of worms that they will never be able to close, and that they'll actually never be able to repair those. And even though you may not like hearing it, but you know what? We can't get into that dialogue, because if we get into that dialogue, we'll never get out of it.
I mean, I think democracy's hard.
That's a good answer. That was a good answer.
Listening to everyone is hard, but I think that's key. I think that's really important. I mean, NYCHA works for the residents. It's a public entity. The residents are their employers in so many ways. And so part of what Mothers on the Move does, in groups like Mothers on the Move, is empowering residents to really feel that. And
Did you want to respond to?
So I'm still trying to
get your mind around what I'm saying is that the problems are so large, and from the point of view of the city, of an administrator, that if we enter into a dialogue about fixing all the problems, it will cost us more than the $5 million of your program, more than the entire budget that we have, because the problems are so large. So if we can not have to engage in a real dialogue and continue to, frankly, throw them peanuts as we go along, we'll be able to maintain something. Otherwise, we'll have a problem that we can't handle.
It seems to take tragedies like someone being hurt or fatally wounded by these elevators, these unfunctional elevators, or someone's ceiling has to cave in before folks want to take action. If that's the case, then that means our developments are going to continue to decay, and it's going to continue to be deplorable, in some cases. So something has to be done eventually. We have a human right to safe and affordable housing, right? And with public housing being the last affordable housing in the country, it seems that in ways that's what folks want, to just let it just decay, just let it go until the inhabitants, to the folks who are living there, would just up and leave. And then now we have developments that we can privatize, that we can change into condos, because that was the big thing, that we want to convert these developments. Yes, gentrified. So it's like what they want to happen. Let's just let them decay. They're nobody.
You think that is a stated agenda or an undercurrent agenda from some?
I'd keep
Boy, did I really talk about opening up a can of worms. Do you think that's a stated agenda? Because that has been said about certain areas of the Bronx.
I mean, it's been played out. It's being played out with the whole gentrification of our developments in our communities, and folks are being displaced. So it's evident to me.
Have there been interactions with elected officials on this particular study? What you're suggesting is a partnership with the city, but of course there are many levels of government that could weigh in, whether it be city council people, or of course any level, whether it be assembly or senators as well.
We've had conversations. We've given this report to a number of electeds, and the whole thing is holding them accountable to folks who have power to help push this agenda further. But the folks that we spoke to, there is in the works, working meetings and follow-ups and meeting with members and residents to see
what would be the hesitation of an elected official, whether you want to, I know you don't want to get anybody mad at you because you really need their support here, but what could be, I mean, to me it's such a logical proposal, but of course you need somebody to stand there and fight and work out the mechanics of it. Have you heard any objections or anything? Nothing.
From what I've heard, no. We haven't had any objections.
Lindsay, play administrator for me, as I just tried to do a moment ago, and explain, if you were working for NYCHA, how, and you said, you know what, man, it's kind of like a nice idea, how you would start the process of getting this together, and then what would ultimately be your vision about what this institute would look like, and then ultimately what public housing could look like.
Right. Well, I think it would be connecting pots of money. As you said, the funding is a big issue, so it would be kind of connecting the energy performance contracting program with the resident employment program and some other different funding that is available, and kind of figuring out how long-term you can leverage those funds in NYCHA's interest. So this program, again, the best thing about it is that it's really a win-win for NYCHA. It can long-term improve housing conditions, it increases rent revenue, it decreases energy costs, it lowers maintenance costs.
So the balance of that, and we're just about, by the way, we did put up some of the contact info if you want to read the study and also contact any of these folks. So the balance, to me, just from listening to what you say, the one piece that really needs work is that you may have unqualified people or uneducated people, and that would cost either some money or some doing to figure out how to put a training program in so that people could actually do the jobs that you're suggesting. Am I right that that's something that really needs work?
A lot of these training programs already exist. It's the whole thing about awareness. A lot of opportunities are missed because simply we don't know. A lot of folks don't know what's available or what's the requirements to be a part of these programs.
We do have the information for Mothers on the Move on there. What's next in this process?
So what's next in this process is getting more residents on board. We want everyone to be aware of what our whole partnership is about. It's about getting folks educated and aware of these
and then
places.
getting, I assume, Lindsay, then getting NYCHA to sit down at the table with you.
Right.
Yes.
We mentioned earlier in the show there have been phone calls. At the moment, we're still waiting.
Yes.
Who should they call? I mean, we'll make the appeal. Who should they? They should call the Urban Justice Center and push it forward.
I think they should call Mothers on the Move.
Mothers on the Move, and we'll partner or support them. Thank you so much, Nova Strachan, for joining us, and Lindsay Cattell from the Urban Justice Center, Novus with Mothers on the Move. We appreciate it. One of the things we like to support are interesting ideas. I thought this was an interesting idea, so we put it out there. Appreciate your time tonight. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show, or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Next Monday night, a big show. Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. will join us. Plenty to ask him, including about the Kingsbridge Armory. Then on Monday, May 9th, we'll talk about the Living Wage campaign. A lot of good things coming up on Bronx Talk through the month of May. Special thanks to producer Jane Folloro, our director Michael Arias, and our cast of thousands up in the booth and around us here in the studio. And to you, good night.